Sometimes before an argument even begins, something breaks in the air. It's not the argument nor the elevated tone. It is the energy that is born the moment we open our mouth without preparing our spirit. Imagine a lake at dawn. The surface is smooth, silent, effortlessly reflecting the sky. Now imagine a stone thrown without warning. The water reacts, not out of anger, but out of impact. This also happens between people when words appear without care. Few realize that speaking is a spiritual act. Each word carries intention, rhythm, and direction. It doesn't just come from the mind, but from the internal state we occupy at that moment. When this state is blurred, speech becomes shock. When it is clear, speech becomes a bridge. We live in a hurried world, where responding quickly is worth more than listening deeply, where winning arguments seems more important than preserving invisible harmony between two hearts. But nature never debates. She adjusts. She gives in. It involves. Before arguing, there is a silent portal, a brief space between the impulse and the voice. This is where the energy can be softened. It is there that certain words, spoken before any confrontation, dissolve tensions that are still present. They weren't even born. These are not magic words. These are states of consciousness translated into sound. They do not cancel differences, but they prevent them from becoming ruptures. They line the field, like someone adjusting their breathing before crossing a bridge narrow. If you feel like a lot of conflicts in your life start before someone even breaks up the first sentence, this video is for you. Maybe it's not about what you say, but about what vibrates in you when you say it. Today, let's walk through this subtle territory together. Learn to prepare your spirit before speaking, and discover how to avoid the clash of energies that tires the soul so much. Simply choosing how to enter the dialogue. Breathe for a moment while listening. Allow the silence to wash away the impulse to react. Just as clear water does not argue with the stone, but surrounds it, the conscious word, it doesn't confront, it welcomes. When we change the input, the entire path changes. It's not about winning, it's about remaining whole. There is ancient wisdom in starting soft. It protects bonds, preserves energy, and honors the invisible that circulates between two beings. Before the next difficult conversation, remember, tone prepares the fate of the meeting. And it all starts before the first word. Stay here, listening, because at the end of this journey you may discover that changing your speech is just a reflex of changing the internal state, with calm, presence, and respect for the invisible rhythm of the encounter. There is an invisible moment before any discussion in which the energies recognize. It is not complete silence, nor a formed word. It is a sensitive field, like the air before rain, charged with intention. When two people come closer to talk, something already moves. If the heart is rigid, the space hardens. If it is open, the space breathes. The speech only confirms what has already been released. In nature, nothing collides without preparation. Clouds slowly accumulate. Winds change direction before the storm. The river warns you when it will overflow. Human beings, however, forgot to feel before reacting. Words spoken without internal alignment are like stones thrown into shallow water. They don't sink. They ricochet. They come back with strength. They create unnecessary waves, hurt nearby shores, and tire those inside the water. Lake. Therefore, ancient traditions have always valued the state prior to speech, not as repression, but as tuning. Just as an instrument needs tuning before a concert, the spirit needs tuning. Adjust before dialogue. The clash of energies does not arise from disagreement. It's born out of haste, the need to prove, from the desire to win. When we speak to defend ourselves, we already attack. When we speak to impose, we already separate. Observe how the body reacts before an argument. Breathing shortens, shoulders rise, the chest closes. This is the silent warning that the energy is not ready to flow. If we ignore this signal and talk anyway, the conversation turns into a dispute. Each sentence becomes a blade, every answer a shield. And in the end, even if someone wins, both are exhausted. But there is another way, a more subtle, almost imperceptible path. It begins with internal recognition. Something in me is agitated. This simple perception already softens the field. When we recognize our own state before speaking, we avoid projecting it onto the other person. Energy organizes itself. The tone changes. Words lose the poison they should never carry. Being like water does not mean agreeing with everything. It means not hardening before touching. The water contours, surrounds, listens to the relief. She does not argue with the stone but learns its shape. Before any discussion, there is an invisible choice. Enter with stiffness or presence, urgently or with listening. This choice defines whether there will be a clash or an encounter. If this perception starts to make sense to you, perhaps something inside is already shifting, quieting, and when the energy calms down, the word finds the right path to cross without hurt. This initial care is not a social strategy, it is spiritual hygiene. He cleans the space before the meeting. When we learn to do this, we realize that many conflicts never come to an end. Be born. They dissolve at the very beginning, like fog touched by the morning sun. Speaking then stops being a defense and becomes an offer. Listening stops being a threat and becomes presence. And even when there is disagreement, she walks without violence, respecting the invisible rhythm that sustains every human relationship. This is how conversation turns into safe passage, where no one needs to get hurt to exist and everything remains whole in the silence after final. Before any word is born, there is an invisible gesture of purification, not an external ritual, but an internal adjustment. How to wash your hands before touching something delicate. The spirit also needs to be cleansed before speaking. Speech carries the state of the speaker. If the inside is cloudy, the word comes out heavy. If it is clear, the word flows lightly. Therefore, silence is not absence. It is preparation. In nature, nothing grows in contaminated soil. The water needs to be clean to reflect the sky. The wind needs to be free to circulate without destroying it. This is also the case with dialogue. It is born from the inner terrain. Many discussions are not caused by the topic, but by the internal state of the speaker. The word only reveals what was already in agitation. When we ignore this, we use speech as an emotional release, and the other becomes the recipient of our imbalance. Purifying before speaking is not being silent forever. It's recognizing what moves inside. It's allowing emotion to exist without it commanding the voice. It's breathing before responding, like someone making space for air to circulate. There is profound wisdom in delaying speaking for a few seconds. During this interval, the energy reorganizes itself. The impulse loses strength. Clarity gains presence. And what would be said sharply can be said with precision and care. Conscious silence is not escape. It's alignment. He observes the whirlwind without drowning in it. He embraces emotion without turning it into a weapon. When we speak from this clean space, something changes in the encounter. The other feels. Even without understanding it rationally, he realizes that there is no attack. The body relaxes. The listening opens. Purification does not mean cold neutrality. It means calm honesty. It is possible to disagree without contaminating. It is possible to set limits without hurting them. It is possible to express pain without spreading it. Before arguing, silently ask, where is that word coming from? If you come in a hurry, wait. If it comes from anger, breathe. If it comes from fear, embrace it. When you come from the presence, speak. The speech that comes after this care carries less weight. She doesn't seek to win. Try to express yourself without breaking. And even when the other remains rigid, their energy does not clash. This is the power of inner purification. She does not control the other. She protects you, preserves your energy, your clarity, and your spiritual integrity. When we learn to clear space before speaking, we realize that many words are no longer necessary, and those that remain become precise, almost inevitable. Like water that naturally finds its way between stones, the word aligned passes through without hurting, leaving only the feeling that something true was said at the time right, with the gentleness of someone who respects the invisible that sustains every relationship. Words can be bridges or blades, not because of the meaning they carry in the dictionary, but because of the energy with which they are launched. The same phrase, said from different states, creates opposite destinies. In modern everyday life, this becomes evident. Just observe an interrupted conversation, an awkward response, a comment done without presence. Within seconds, space contracts. The body reacts. the listening closes, and what could have been an encounter turns into a clash. In networks and families, at work, we speak as if we were always under attack. We anticipate defenses. We build walls before we even listen. Each word becomes a test of strength, not an invitation to understanding. When this happens, we don't discuss ideas. We dispute territory. Speech stops being communication and becomes protection. And excessive protection always hurts. A blade doesn't need to be sharp to hurt. Just be thrown carelessly. In the same way, a word said without presence cuts ties. Even when the content seems harmless, the other feels the rigidity before understanding the meaning. But when the word is born from internal alignment, something changes profoundly. She doesn't move forward. She catches up. It doesn't impose. It crosses like a suspension bridge over choppy waters. Bridges don't solve the river. They allow crossing. And that's all a conversation needs to be. A way of crossing a space together. Sensitive without CA, go into the abyss of reaction. Before speaking, there is a silent choice. Use words to defend yourself or to reveal yourself. To win or to stay connected. This choice defines whether the speech brings together or separates. Many conflicts are prolonged because no one abandons the blade. Each answer sharpens the previous one. Each argument hardens the field. And the more you try to explain, the less you are heard. If this dynamic sounds familiar to you, perhaps it's an invitation to pause. An invitation to realize that changing the type of word changes the type of meeting. When this idea begins to resonate, something inside already awakens. And this awakening is the beginning of harmonization. The bridge is born when we speak from listening, when we leave space between one sentence and another, when we allow silence to complete meaning. The other person feels like they don't need to defend themselves, and the conversation breathes. It's not about being passive. It's about being precise. An aligned word does not waste energy. She gets straight to the point without crossing the other person's heart. When we use the word as a bridge, the conflict does not disappear but is transformed. It stops being confrontation and becomes dialogue. And even if there is no agreement, integrity is preserved. Maybe you've already experienced this. A difficult conversation that, for some reason, flowed without hurt. It wasn't luck. It was energy aligned before speech. Learning to choose bridges over blades is not weakness. It is spiritual maturity. It is understanding that the word is an extension of the internal state. And when the state changes, the world around responds. This awareness is a daily training, a constant return to the center before speaking. And when it establishes itself, something silent happens. Discussions lose strength, encounters gain depth, and communication ceases to be a battlefield and becomes make-safe passage, where even differences can coexist without destroying what is there essential. Between two beings, there are words that are not used to explain but to harmonize. They don't push the conversation forward by force. They lay the groundwork where conversation can happen. These words are not ready-made formulas. They do not work when repeated mechanically. They only have effect when they are born from a specific internal state: presence, humility, and opening. When someone starts a speech by saying, "I could be wrong," something softens, not because reason disappears, but because rigidity gives way. Energy stops being confrontation and becomes possibility. Words that recognize the other create space. I understand how you feel. Maybe I didn't see it from that angle. It helps me understand better. These phrases do not diminish the speaker. They expand the field where they both breathe. Harmonizing is not agreeing. It is preparing the ground so that disagreement does not turn into an attack. It's like clearing the path before the walk, even though you know there will be climbs. In nature, the strongest encounters start out mild. Rain starts as mist. The day dawns in silence. The wind warns before it blows hard. Harmony is not the absence of force. It is well-distributed force. When we use words that welcome before arguing, we avoid shock. The other person does not need to defend themselves immediately. The body does not go into alert. Listening remains open for longer. Many people believe that to soften speech is to lose power, but true power is not in pushing. It's about supporting the field without breaking it. A harmonizing word keeps the dialogue alive, even when the topic is difficult. These words often carry three invisible qualities. First, recognition. The other is seen. Second, responsibility. The emotion itself is assumed. Third, clear intention. Not to hurt, not to dominate, not to win. When we say, "This affects me," instead of "You always do this," something changes radically. The energy returns inward. The blade retracts. The bridge begins to form. These words do not eliminate the conflict, but they make it passable. They allow the truth to be told without scattering fragments. May limits be placed without humiliation. May pains be expressed without contamination. You may notice that when you use this type of language, some people find it strange. They wait for the attack. They wait for the defense. And when that doesn't come, something in them slows down. This is the effect of harmonization. It disrupts old patterns, breaks automatic reaction cycles. It creates a new space where before there was only repetition. If you begin to experience these words, even internally, you are already changing the field. Sometimes you just need to start with less certainty and more presence, less affirmation and more listening. Harmonizing is a gesture of spiritual maturity. It is understanding that the word is an extension of the internal state, and when the state is serene, the word becomes shelter. Over time, you realize that you don't need to say everything, and when he says it less, but he says it better. Words begin to carry silence within them, and this silence sustains the meeting. This is how communication stops or wear and turns into mutual care. A care that does not erase differences but prevents them from becoming open wounds. And in this harmonized space, something essential remains intact, even after the conversation ends. When the word is born aligned, something bigger happens. Beyond the conversation, the field reorganizes, the environment changes density. It's as if the invisible found its axis again. Reintegrating energy after, or before, speaking is returning to center. Not to the center of the ego, but to the silent center where there is no urgency to prove anything. There, speech stops being a reaction and becomes an extension of the internal state. In modern life, we are trained to respond quickly, to fill silences, to support positions. But serenity is born when we learn to pause without guilt. Not responding immediately is often the wisest response. When the heart is integrated, the word loses excess. She carries no accumulated anger, no disguised fear. It simply fulfills its function and returns to the silence from which it came. Reintegration is realizing that we are not just what we say. We are also the space we allow before and after speaking. This space is where the energy settles, like dust that falls when the air stops being agitated. Notice how you feel after an aligned conversation. Even though it is difficult, there is less wear and tear. The body is not tense. The mind does not keep repeating scenes. This is a sign that the energy has not clashed. When we speak without alignment, something is left pending. A feeling of brokenness. A noise that keeps echoing. Reintegration dissolves this echo. It happens when we recognize our limits. When we accept that not every truth needs to be told now. When we understand that some words mature better in silence. There is a natural intelligence that operates when we stop forcing. She organizes meetings, smooths times, adjusts distances. Trusting this is a profound gesture of spiritual maturity. By reintegrating, we stop carrying the weight of the conflict inside. Speech does not accompany us like guilt or regret. It ends at the right moment, like a wave that returns to the sea. This return to the center is continuous. It doesn't happen just once. It's a daily presence. Training. A constant reminder that energy precedes words. When you start living like this, something changes in the way people relate to each other. Approach. There is less defensiveness, less dispute, more real meeting space. Even when the other is not available, you remain whole. Your energy does not fragment. This is reintegration. It does not depend on the other's response. It depends on your fidelity to your own internal state. Speak when there is clarity. Silence when there is turbulence. This balance is not passivity. It is silent strength. It is knowing that the true impact is not in the volume of speech, but in the quality of the presence. When the word is born from this place, it fulfills its role and dissolves, leaves no residue, does not create emotional debt. It simply passes, like a breeze that touches and follows. And so, little by little, you realize that harmony is not something that is imposed. It emerges when the human listens again to the invisible rhythm that has always been there, sustaining each meeting, each silence and each word spoken at the right time. At the end of every conversation, something remains in the air. These are not the exact phrases, nor the arguments used. It is the sensation left in the invisible field between two beings. There are dialogues that end and continue to echo like open wounds, and there are others who remain silent, but leave peace. The difference is not in the theme, but in the energy that sustained the speech. When we learn to start softly, the word stops being an instrument of separation. It becomes a continuation of care. Even when disagreeing, something essential is preserved. Perhaps this is one of life's greatest silent teachings. Not every truth needs to be accompanied by impact. Not all clarity needs to generate shock. There is a path where firmness goes hand in hand with kindness. By using certain words before arguing, you don't just change the conversation, you change the destination of the meeting. The opening tone sets the stage for everything else to happen. This does not mean avoiding conflict at all costs. It means crossing them without losing integrity, without breaking bonds that didn't need to be broken, without wasting energy where there could be understanding. When speech is born aligned, it respects the invisible. Respect other people's time. Respect your own internal rhythm. And above all, it respects the sacred space that exists between two consciousnesses in contact. Little by little, you realize that you don't need to explain yourself so much. Don't even defend yourself that much. Don't even try that much. Presence does this work silently. This is the path of harmony. Not a perfect path, but a conscious path, where mistakes still happen, but the return to the center is faster. Where the word adjusts, learns, matures. If you start to apply this, even in small conversations, something changes. Discussions lose intensity. Silences stop being threatening. And dialogue becomes a space for passage, not confrontation. You may find that many words that once seemed necessary no longer are. And those that remain carry more truth, less noise, more intention, less impulse. If this content has brought you clarity, consider continuing this journey with us. Subscribe to the channel and walk deeper into this subtle territory where word, silence, and energy meet. Because life doesn't just test us on what we say, she observes us, above all, in how we begin, in the internal state that we take to the meeting, in the vibration we chose before the first sentence. What if what we call conflict is just a mismatch of rhythms? What if harmony arises the moment we learn to listen before reacting? Perhaps deep down, the fate of each relationship is decided not by what is said, but by the invisible spirit that accompanies every word since its birth.